Thank you all for coming. Some of you I know really well. If I don't know you that well, I'm Ron Cavanaugh, Executive Director of the Literary Freedom Project. We're based here in the Bronx, New York, where we do literary programs, as the name suggests. We partner with different organizations to present literary programs, not just in the Bronx, but of course, now since COVID nationally. But one of our long time partners, AALBC.com, the African American Literature Book Club, which is the #1 website for and about books on and by Black people. They're one of our longtime partners. Troy is one of my longtime friends. If he didn't have enough headaches with a new baby, he decided to become a publisher. And I know he does everything that he does really well, and he puts his heart and his soul into it. So we're just going to introduce Troy Johnson. He can say a few words about, his website as well as this new endeavor. Troy?
All right, thanks, Ron. I've met Ron in '98, just doing what we do with books. And, in fact, in a bookstore that Dr. Brenda Green ran in Curry. We met in Curry. And I actually learned about Kalisha's work through Ron's magazine, a magazine he was attempting to get in Curry to carry at that time. And I learned about her work. And, Ron has a really wonderful aesthetic in terms of the types of literature that he appreciates and embraces and endorses. Kalisha and I are connected, and she gave me the opportunity to publish her work, and I hadn't read word one, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm glad I did. It is a terrific book. It's meaty in terms of what's covered. It covers contemporary issues. It covers, you'll see a glass of wine and understand, alcoholism is talked about. And it's just a real meaty book. And I think you all will love it who reads it. And the other thing that I want to also mention is, and it's something that Ron and I both share, we are also about empowering, Black people, helping our voices to be heard. And this book was created, every single professional who worked on this book was Black or ran a Black-owned business. Paul Coates with his Black Classic Press printed the paperbacks, the editor, the book designer, obviously the author, and the publisher. So this is my first attempt, my first foray into publishing, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's a great book. It's well produced, so it's indistinguishable from, any mainstream published book, at least to my eye. And it's available in all formats. Audiobook comes out in December. Ebook is available, and it's available in hardcover and print, paperback. And it's available anywhere books are sold. So go to your favorite bookstore. If you don't buy from AOBC, you can go to the Big A or Walmart or wherever. Any independent Black-owned bookstore has the ability to carry it. It's already in libraries. So just make sure you get it. So I without any further ado, let's let Kalisha and Ron have their conversation. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Troy. So, and again, I just want to reiterate, and Troy or anyone can drop a message in the chat as to where you can purchase Kalisha's new book. I don't know if it'll show on the screen, but Running to Fall. So please support Troy Johnson, as we want you to support, Black-owned businesses and publishers and bookstores and, all of the above. So thank you for contributing, not just virtually, but now in the physical world, Troy. But we're here to talk about the woman of the hour, the day, maybe the week. She has her new book out, Running to Fall. I've known Kalisha for quite a while. How long have I known you now? 15 years, so maybe, Kalisha? 20?
Yeah, it was my first and second book, Conception and Upstate, and Ron gave me my very first magazine cover. I say first because it won't be the last. And I was, yeah, so everybody, yeah, it was like the first, it was just like, you have no idea. For the second book, Conception, which I was shocked because that was my sophomore novel, which tend to fall through the cracks. So that came out like 2007 or 8. And so it was really, when he, wanted to put me on the cover of Mosaic, which I was already reading, because I was reading all the Black publications and magazines. I was like, really?
All
Me?
4 of us?
Yeah, I know. It was QBR, Mosaic, Black and Two Book Review.
Yeah. And
That's 4.
Yeah,
I thought 3. Okay. And so all when I showed everybody that, they were like, "Oh, you're a star, you're a star," because it's like you're on the cover or something. They're like, "Oh."
Before you continue, let me read your bio just so everyone is familiar with who you are. Kalisha Buckhanon is the author of novels Upstate, Conception, Solemn, and Speaking of Summer. Her books have been reviewed and featured in Essence, O Magazine, Time, USA Today, Entertainment Weekly, Cosmo, BuzzFeed, LitHub, and more. Her short stories have been printed in Fiction, Fiction International, Oxford American, Black Renaissance Noir, Michigan Quarterly Review, Pluck, and many others. She has also been seen on ID, BET, and TV1. Now, listen to this. This is funny. TV1 true crime show as an expert, as opposed to being a suspect. So thank you for being an expert and not a suspect. Her most recent novel, the novel that we're celebrating tonight, Running to Fall, published, like we said, by Troy Johnson at aaalbc.com. So, and again, I think someone put a link in the chat. Please purchase the book. If you have read it or received a review copy, you might want to purchase a copy for a friend or loved one. Even though it was 80 degrees in New York today, Christmas will be here before you know it. So please do that. And again, just to support the people who've been supporting us. So again, thank you so much. I also want to, one other thing before we really get started, Dr. Brenda Green wants to say something about a program she's having this week. So Dr. Green, can you say a few words about that?
Okay, we are really excited that we are going to have Troy Johnson again and Linda Duggins, who will be talking about independent publishing, self-publishing, and literary activism as part of our John Oliver Killens reading series. We're going to be joined by Mahogany Brown, Paul Coates, publisher of Black Classic Press, as I said, Linda Duggins, Vice President of Strategic Planning at Edelweiss by Above the Tree Line, and William Damani Keene. And we have an author, essayist, and journalist, Thembisa Amshaka, who will be moderating. So I put the information in the chat. This is free and open to the public. It's Thursday, November the 10th. And it really ties in well with what you're doing tonight, having Troy Johnson publish this book. And you talked about buy Black, publish Black, produce Black. This is what it's about. So we'll be talking about how you can really support Black publishing in many, many ways. I hope you will join us. And I
Thank you
put the
so much.
information in the chat.
Yeah. Thank you again, Dr. Green.
Thank you.
So let's get started with our conversation. Also, everyone is invited to put questions. We're going to talk just briefly. Once people start putting questions in the chat, we'll start to sort of reference those questions and we'll pitch those to Kalisha. If you want to personally ask a question, you can use the raise hand feature. I'll unmute you or you can unmute yourself. And when we indicate, you can ask your own question. You know, it's interesting, Kalisha, a few years ago, like maybe 5 years ago, I guess you were in New York, and I didn't know exactly what you were doing, but you were having problems with the Airbnb. And I remember I was walking you home, or we were at some event in Harlem. Now that turned out to be not the problems, but your Airbnb visit. Turns out that it was also part of your research on Speaking of Summer. Is that correct? And but do you do that often? Do you sort of immerse yourself in the situations that are featured in your book? You're muted, Kalisha.
Okay. Yeah, I was out there for runs. Like, I didn't know what Kalisha was doing. I didn't either. Like, I was just in New York for like months. Somebody called me a gypsy, a traveling bohemian. I don't know. So, but my Solemn, the third book had come out. So I came out there to do events and launch that, and never went back to Chicago for months. And so yeah, I was in an Airbnb on one like 16th and Lenox. So I was really in the heart, or 17th, 18th.
Yeah, somewhere.
Yeah, I was right in the heart of everything and running around. And no, actually, Speaking of Summer at that time was already done. I thought, but it, came back alive because I was in Harlem and I was running, I was right there in the setting. I was looking at the environment. Does that happen? Most definitely for me. I mean, there people, ask what kind of research did you do and all of that. I definitely do research on like historical things or I mean, there's so much you have to research. Even if a song comes to mind or something like that and you put the song in, it's like, was that song actually out at the time that the scene is taking place? So you have to go back and look that up. And politics and conception. I got into some medical stuff, medical apartheid, basically eugenics and all that. But the majority of what I write is, I don't want to say it's not lived experience, but it just flows out naturally almost. So yeah, it was a jolt that time, definitely, to go back to the book and give her a lot more to do. The character.
Because I know in your first book, Upstate, a lot of people, I mean, this is what we do to Black people. Like, Black people can't have imaginations. So anytime, at least within the presentation of popular culture, anytime a Black fiction writer writes a book, people want to know, is that their real experience? As though Stephen King goes through all this craziness that's in his books. But your first book, which I believe was your first book, Upstate, which was really well received. kind of put you on a path of this young writer who is speaking to issues to and about issues that are really affecting and reflecting the Black diaspora. Can you tell us what went into that first book?
You know, it was similar to, it's so funny you say what you just said about Black writers are not allowed to have imaginations. Because yeah, once again, I lived in Harlem, I was teaching, I was working, and you know, all the characters and all the situations and the it's all me in some ways. But these, you know, voices that come out, or these characters, are just kind of different, more interesting vessels, because I'm boring. Like, I'm not, I'm very boring. You know, so these are just more intriguing people to actually say or think or do or be maybe what, you know, I would be doing or being. And so I was surrounded by kids all the time because I was one of those teaching artists, like anybody, right? I saw Sophia Quintero, like we have these experiences, Diane Gillette, like we have experiences teaching kids and being around these kids. And so it was like, I think I started writing a book about young people to just deal with the irritation and annoyances of having to like be with these kids in Harlem. And so it was just became a story about some kids in Harlem. But to your point about the Black writers not being allowed to have imagination, my mentor at that time was Sapphire, the writer, and I didn't know what the book was. I didn't know it was a book. I just was like, oh, this boy's writing letters to his girlfriend, because these kids were always writing notes. And, you know, I did it too when I was young. And she told me, you need to write that. Like, I was writing short stories, a bunch of stories and stuff for my thesis at school. And she was like, no, you write the letters. And I was like, really? That's who was going to want to read this? And I went ahead and did it anyway. But when the book came, and it resulted in the book that launched my career, but when the book came out, I've been very outspoken about this over the years, which is why this is, you know, so great. I feel like this is such a safe space, because it's like I've known so many of you over the years and talked to so many, you know, just been very, very supported and allowed to speak. But I was very outspoken about how doors actually shut for me with upstate, as for as many doors as it opened. This is not a complaint. Yeah, this isn't a complaint. Like, I'm only here now because of that book. That was my homework that Sapphire took to an agent.
That book did place you in conversations about the carceral system that we're having every day now. But this is literally like 15 years ago you wrote this book, or so it came out?
It's almost 20. I got
Wow.
I don't want to say I got the deal when I was graduating school. I was young then. Yeah, it was. I just saw the editor of the novel, Monique Patterson, and we said it was ahead of its time, you know, at that time. And later on, it's been, you know, still around for that reason. But what I was saying was a lot of bigger press, or you know, kind of these outlets, you know, these spaces that are, you know, really exclusive. I don't want to say any names, but you know what I'm talking about. Were very shocked that it wasn't my story. Like, when they discovered, wait a minute, this girl, like I was literally called into my publicist's office, because I lived in New York, and I was always, you know, in the office and hanging out with people. And asked, like, who did I, you know in prison, and what, was the real kind of inspiration of this story. And a couple of really large reviews and covers and things that were going to feature me didn't do what you did, Ron. They backed out when I was like, this is not my story. Like, I definitely have known, I know people in prison, trust me, my communities, my people went away. But in terms of this being, based on something I'm going to feed you as a sensationalist part of my life, no. And when I did speak with Black writers about this, older Black writers, mentors, people, Sapphire at that time, they were just livid, and they said, it happened to, we're not allowed to have imaginations. And, it really kind of scared me a lot. And, obviously I kept writing, and didn't really back down of my principles. You write the story that comes to you, basically. And so, yeah, but, and that's kind of what I have loved about this community that you've cultivated, Ron, and Troy and Center for Black Literature and other, is the range of the literature and the aesthetics that you aspire to. And
one of the things that's interesting about you as a writer, just speaking of range, are the range of books that you have written. You are, I mean, it could have been easy to sort of stay on that track that you started, constantly writing about the prison system, or writing about young motherhood, or even just staying within youth. But you seem to not want to be sort of blocked off into any one genre or age range, for that matter, because in your publishing lifetime, YA, young adult fiction, has seemed to become such a popular movement. And how are you navigating that as a writer? On the one hand, you just want to write books and you want people to read books, but publishing is telling you, you must write for a specific age group, an age group with of color, and so on and so on. So they've kind of like marginalized you as much as possible for their marketing benefits. And I just want to know, like, how do you approach writing, just as somebody who wants to tell different stories?
Yeah. I always have a lot of things in progress. I'm always writing just things, tons of things. But sometimes something just like takes off. And, I remember speaking with Donna Hill in the conversation that we had for Center for Black Literature. And she was talking about, how she always had to weave her writing into her life, because she's like, I didn't have time to just go off and retreat and, let stories hit me. I had to, she just writes, as part of life. I'm kind of similar, where I, don't have that. I never had the luxury of being able to disappear, although I earned that, somewhat through the books. But sometimes for me, books don't finish until I'm knocked out by it. So I'll be writing stuff. But like, for instance, Parts of Speaking in Summer are things I had written like many, many years ago. But, I just wrote it, and it didn't take off, so to speak. And then it actually branched off into like a story and all that. But in terms of a novel, there has to, for the fuel, I guess, to actually go through the process of it just has to be a point that's very emotional, I think, and spiritual for me.
Mhm.
With Running to Fall, that point was speaking with a lot of women about during the pandemic, and a lot of people and a lot of friends, and realizing that I wanted to like reach out to people, and finding out that a lot of people were complaining about, you know, drinking at home. Because normally you go out for that. And it's like we started sitting at home, you know, making that Netflix and, you know, maybe entertaining a few people, but yeah. And so, you know, I was definitely guilty myself of just kind of looking up like, wait a minute, I'm like drinking at home and this is my idea of fun. And
Mhm.
it's not, you know, this it's a problem. But that was coupled with a lot of reports about women drinking and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
yeah, and there was that point, and then it was, I didn't feel finished with the missing Black woman situation.
Mhm.
Speaking of Summer, obviously hit that. But you know, for those who have read it, they know the story. She, you know, there was,
Yeah.
but in terms of this, I didn't feel like I was complete, that was completely out of my system, what I wanted to say about um Black women being missing, you know.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Fed Up Publishing, they have a question for you. I don't know if they're still in the chat.
Yes, yes, I'm here. Well, my name
Okay.
is Teresa Maley, but my company is Fed Up Publishing Sales.
Okay.
My bad, I didn't have my real name.
That's all
But
right.
I was thinking about your question, Ron, that you asked her before she started speaking, and you were saying how like the difference between not being the status quo as far as writing different type of things other than the young adult, like fantasy, anything other than like the urban complex of Black books, basically. And I was just thinking the other day, because my company is urban based, but it's a different urban where I look into fantasy books and I look how J.K. Rowling is. And the problem is really not us being really, I'll say we're not being like just assume that, oh, our stories deserves praise and stuff, like, oh, you went through this struggle, so you deserve it. That's supposed to be a real story. But I noticed when not racist or anything, but like when the white construct of literature comes, they are wowed by fantasy, imaginary things, and it's like clapped upon. But the only books I see in my Hair Washington Library in Chicago downtown, 20 miles from me, I only see urban crime type based things and sex, drugs, and money. It sells, yes, to a certain crowd, but that's not all of us in the urban sector.
Mhm.
We are regular people who have imaginations, but a lot of these young kids out here, you know, it's not being put out in front street that you have imaginations, because they haven't been taught that in schools, especially now social media, and it's so like crimes, drugs, and gangster stuff. So they think, you know, they don't even know if they can have an imagination. They don't even know what that is because it's not being taught by us people who know how to be creative. And I just saw like a billboard that was like had a creative art school, and I never seen that billboard when I was growing up. I'm like, wow. So it's like people out here that we're all separate, but we're together trying to like get the imagination thing going and get like how, you know, writing is really supposed to go as far as like reading books and the healthiness of it. It was a 3-year-old boy at the Bessie Coleman Library. He's like, oh, I don't want to read. And that's concerning. That's very
Yeah, yeah.
concerning.
But I
Yeah.
don't want to cut you off. I definitely want you to make
Sorry,
your
I was not
that's
happy.
all right. That's all right. We want to hear what you have to say, but do you have a specific question though? Just like
Oh
one.
yeah, yes. As far as her the title, I haven't read it yet, but I will be soon reading it. I didn't know about this Zoom, and when I seen like the problems of women drinking, I have friends myself who are heavy drinkers and they're under 30 years old,
Mhm.
and like how, and they're good people, they want to be, you know, get away from being like that, but it's like there's
Yeah.
no route except for drinking, because everybody drinks, so it's like when we come together we just drink. And so
Yeah.
how do you like, I haven't read the book, but what made you get the strength to to write about it? Because that's a lot of pages in a book to write about that coping strategy. So
Thank you for that
what
question.
changed one day? Yeah. Thank you.
Well, Black women have a pressure, Black artists, female artists, we have a pressure to kind of present ourselves as good and saintly and this and that. And, you kind of see it more in rap and music where Black women can be the bad girl. But for us, writers, for me, I was very intrigued about the idea of writing about a Black female alcoholic. And it's pretty clear early on that she's drinking too much. She's not a, hopeless medicinal, alcoholic, like dying of, people actually do die from drinking. She's not that yet. But she clearly needs help, and she, can't manage, and this has been going on for her for a long time. And I go into why and how it's been going on for her, that she's been drinking too much. And so where she's at now in the book is a cusp. There's a point where I don't know, I feel like this is one book I'm gonna have to clarify that I have an imagination. I'm gonna have to really put this book.
What's misunderstood has
I have seen you drink, Kalisha, so
I could throw back some wine myself, yes, but I'm not like this, this character is not me. I'm gonna have to, this is one of those books I'm gonna have to keep repeating that. But so I don't really know the point, or maybe I do. Maybe that's why I wrote the book.
The spirit in you. The spirit in you.
Who knows? Maybe that's why I wrote the book, because I'm very serious that there were many women having conversations about we were drinking, and it's, you don't even think about it really. So, but she's at a point where there's hope for her. Well, there's always hope. But she's at a point where it's not that, like she's, collapsing, but she's doing a lot that's wrong. And that's, so, yeah. But I don't know. I just really wanted to write the character. I had never really, Bernice has a book about alcoholism. I mean, there's alcoholism stories and narratives, but, I wanted to tell the story of a Black woman.
What's interesting about this book, Running to Fall, is you really incorporated several contemporary issues that we are all trying to address, coming out of or being in the pandemic, what that did to this to the character. But there's also this sort of public persona that we all have access to because of social media, and how we present ourselves to the public, even though there are issues going on that we don't present, publicly.
Definitely. I mean, it was just, yeah, and writing about the pandemic, and how, this is my pandemic novel. Like, I read during the pandemic that there was going to be an onslaught of pandemic novels. And yeah, I mean, I guess this is that for me. But yeah, this kind of confrontation with, she's in a marriage, the confrontation with her spouse, kind of, because all the stuff, they're influencers, or I don't know what they are, or he is, but, kind of this image that they have, we're going to parties and sitting on Instagram and making your content is their relationship. And then once all that is stripped away, it's like, well, what really is this relationship? So yeah, that definitely played into it. And, you know, but really it was just a storm of many things, but the real heart of it was kind of capturing this character who, and the Black Lives Matter movement, I have to say, is always going to be a part of things. With Speaking of Summer, it was really Sandra Bland was very in my mind. During the pandemic was Eric Garner, but there's a scene pretty early on in the book, one of the first scenes that I wrote, where she is stopped by a white cop. Tragedy, the main character is stopped by a white cop. And she's drunk, you know, and so I basically, you know, it's almost a reversal of the moments and stories that Black Lives Matter tells, where, you know, we're always looking at innocent Black people and being drunk. She shouldn't have, you know, I'm not saying that should cost a Black person their lives, but you know, the encounter winds up going smoothly. So, you know, despite her being drunk. So there was that happening during the pandemic. So as Troy kind of said, it's a lot of stuff going on in the book, but the heart of it really is her confronting her drinking problem.
Donna Hill has a question, then we'll go to Sophia's question, but Donna asked, what was the inspiration? We kind of touched on this. What was the inspiration for Running to Fall and your decision to publish with an independent publisher?
Yeah, well, I actually started off with the major publishing house and Big Press, St. Martin's Press, and my prior publisher had been an independent publisher, a small publisher, and it was actually just a lot of things had happened. I put the book out on the market, and the new year came, and a lot of things had gone on, and you know, kind of happened, and you know, I was kind of disappointed and at the, you know, reception of my next work, because I was pretty finished. I learned like a lesson getting deals, multi-book deals. I don't really like to have deals for things I haven't finished. I don't want that hanging over my head. So yeah, the, you know, novel was finished and all of that. And it was kind of just organic, just conversation or whatever with Troy. I actually thought that AALBC had published books before. And there were a few titles that I had only known about through AALBC. And he pushed them so much, and I saw them so much, that I thought that, you know, they were, that he had published the books. And so I was actually thinking about, you know, self-publishing or looking into that, and reached out to him to, you know, figure that he would know everything about that, and, you know, because of all the activism and things he does with books. And then it just kind of sprouted of like, well, yeah, well, with all that he was telling me and doing, it's like, well, could you just do it? And you know, because I was lost. And yeah, things have like really changed with publishing. It's very like long. You know, what I really like about what you know, Troy did here is we really got the book out quickly. You know, things have just slowed down so much and changed so much. I was looking at really long lead times to get the book out, you know, with other, you know, big publishers and things. And it's like, well, you know, do I really want to wait, you know, a year and a half, 2 years of my life, you know, when I could be done with this book? Because for me, it really takes up a lot of mental and emotional space, a book. Even there's no point that it's done, to be honest with you. It's not really done until it's in print for me. And I, to have that kind of chain around, my neck for so long that, okay, the book is done technically, but it's not done. It's really not done till a few months into, the printing. So yeah, so that's basically it. Just kind of sprouted and flowered, and just like we just started working on it like seamlessly. The next thing you know, it was like this, and I was like, oh well, let me throw it. I'd done a cover already, and my imagining of this woman and the image and all that, and we just kept working on it, and it was really going well. And we started thinking about this radical idea of Black publishing and, kind of the Black arts movement. And this is what it was, is we pulled together our resources, our, people, talent, community, and all that. So yeah, it was just this like really radical kind of idea that just actually manifested in the actual product, like, so yeah, I tried did like a tremendous amount of work, and yeah, because like I said, I thought he had done it before.
I don't know, Sophia Quintero, if you're still in the room and you have a question.
I do. Can everybody hear me?
Sophia.
Hi, congratulations. It's so good to see you. I'm so excited to read this and to see everyone. So, I'm a day one fan of all your work. And one of the many, many reasons why you are one of my favorite authors, and I read everything that you write, is not only your willingness to tackle these very difficult issues, but also the complexity and sensitivity and nuance and thoroughness that you approach these topics with. And so you inspire me as a writer. And so what I wanted to ask you is, we're talking about how Black folks are not allowed to have imagination. And sometimes in that rightful call for us to allow us to have imagination, to be in more diverse genres, fantasy, romance, superhero, whatever it is, sometimes what happens, and this is something I'm gonna be transparent, it concerns me as someone who writes contemporary realism and likes to tackle these kinds of issues as well. Sometimes, as valid as that critique is, sometimes what happens is when you're tackling the kind of subjects that you do, people will label it trauma porn.
Yeah.
Right? And so I wanted to hear from you, how do you respond to that when, I definitely have my positions about that, but I wanted to hear from you. How do you respond to folks who, in their rightful calls for more diverse stories and sometimes lighter fare, who are concerned that when we talk about Black pain, are concerned about it being, about we're trafficking in trauma?
It's funny you say that, because the character is a writer. She's writing her life story in the book. And her husband, who's kind of a big shot, hooked her up with an agent, and the agent's like, oh, no trauma porn. Like, that's what the agent's like. Yeah, she's like, no. And Tragedy's like, well, then how do I tell my story? So yeah, it's once again the range. I mean, life is joy and pain. I mean, that's pretty much it. Right. And no one else is asked to dissect or kind of cut off their experiences. And pretty much the greatest stories are all steeped in the pain of the characters, carried along with the joy of the characters. And what I have a pretty scathing kind of critique of, or response to that critique that Black writers get, which is for mainstream publishing, it's like, you won't let us eliminate the pain. You know, we have so many writers who write lifestyle novels, who write romance novels, who write big kind of contemporary just entertainment, chick lit, that kind of stuff. We have so many of those, and we have writers like Martha Southgate. I remember that brilliant article, Writers Like Us, where she talked about just being like her cohort of women, Black women writers in their 50s and 40s who were just writing lives, you know, like Kathleen Collins, those kind of, and how they weren't getting published and they weren't getting deals and they weren't getting press, and they weren't getting coverage. And so I'm not saying, Ron had asked earlier, well, how do you deal with the market and be a writer? No, I don't generally write to the market. I mean, I've tried that or been told to do that. I was with an agent for a very long time that was like, write a bestseller, and I got stuck. Because I can't do that. I have to write what comes. But at the, you know, for us as Black writers, I think there's, and that's what's exciting about too, what happened with Troy is, I do think that because this was a couple that was well off, there's pain, there's an undercurrent of pain and tragedy in Tragedy's life. But sorry, I can't. Okay. There's an undercurrent of pain in her life. But for the most part, these are Black folks living large and, you know, or trying, they're aspiring to way more than they have. That's the whole point. And, you know, definitely, I think some of that plays into, you know, publishers maybe not wanting the voices that we have, you know, kind of our upper middle class, the world, Margot Jeffers, you know,
Denise McFadden, who's in the room tonight. You know, she writes such a wide variety of books also. So, yeah. Thank you for that question, Sophia. I'll see you on the D train in the Bronx. I run into Sophia on the train before. But Kalisha, I don't know if you are prepped to read anything from the book. I don't want to put you too much on the spot.
I did have wait, am I gonna read that part?
You read whatever you want to read.
Okay, that part that I referenced with Sophia's question about, and this will provide a peek into the character, publishing, all of it, I don't know. So this is just Tragedy, you know, breaking down. And I like writing about writers. It's definitely something I know, and it's a hard process. So Tragedy's trying to write this book. And so she's just telling you about it. My memoir, The Girl Who Didn't Burn, My Life in Foster Care, was number 1, 3 diaries I kept a lock on, and for one, I couldn't find the key anymore. Number 2, 2 composition books I salvaged from high school, filled with questions and angst. Number 3, 2 Dollar Tree photo albums with water and heat damaged family photos to pick from. For those shiny pages of pics, all autobiographies must have. Number 4, a crinkly folder of poetry and sketches my younger self dreamed would go somewhere. Number 5, a rubber banded brick of index cards with a chronology of my life and facts of people in it. Number 6, a divider notebook where I outlined perfect chapters and parts. Number 7, unfinished documents on 2 computers, mostly a desktop I didn't give internet connection powers, on advice from an online writing seminar to block distractions. Number 8, about 20 pages, mostly blank, typed on a vintage typewriter from an eBay whim. So any writer who's finished a book will this kind of scrapbook of stuff that we do that ultimately builds a book. But anyway, But it was tragedy's book for Victor, for Victor's friends and family and business partners, for scarce women I called friends, for chicks I knew but not really, for old coworkers I kept in touch with, and for old therapists who did their best with me. Most importantly, for a big agent in New York City, Patricia Rogers, I guess she signed me just off being Victor Powell's wife. The hotel is just my day job, I'd first lied to Victor, between my first and last bite of roast guinea pig on our first date, out for Peruvian. I'm really a writer. It's self-empowerment, I'd first promised the agent. No, not trauma and poverty porn. Oh no, Patricia said. Misery memoir is on the way out. People want to feel good, live large now, survival, beating the odds, thriving. You're on track. The agent was one of Victor's people who knew people, calling shortly after we moved to the Glens. Patricia Rogers Lick completely avoided serious fiction and made its killing off memoir, business books, and true crime in audio or ebooks. She was Black, but her client list was integrated enough to make you wonder, most with many branded titles and high followings online. She still emailed to ask if I had something for her. She connected me to staff from an inspirational publisher and motivational speaker agency. They asked me to tell them more. I had no more to say or show. I just changed the recipients' names and addresses on the same letter I sent the agent. Victor never wasted an opportunity. I caved in to email him pages of my masterpiece sometimes. Always, he got LinkedIn influencers and mommy bloggers firing at me days later. Do you have an excerpt we can post? Can you guest blog? When is the pub date? I'm not ready. I'm not finished. I'll call when we narrow down a deal. My ambitious husband even came up with the title. The Girl Who Didn't Burn, Victor suggested one day over a lazy Omaha Steaks dinner in Chicago, before the house and Grayson Glens and our in-home studio and a staff and all of it. Same message. I liked it. Raven McCoy is the big missing woman in the book. Anyway, Raven McCoy's Pat biography and news popped up automatically on YouTube and in my feeds, whether I searched for her or not. Even the cloud knew what I was obsessed with. It didn't know I knew Raven better than she was being shown and discussed. So stereotypical it was. Nice girl and good grades, but troubled childhood and problematic family, blah, blah. The more her stricken mother and relatives gave the public favor of statements and appearances, the more the media picked them apart. The word salads about the perils of being Black and poor were off base. Would her own unique life story get any justice? Would a girl like Joy, her stepdaughter, with her parents and their net worth and zip codes, be spoken of in such limited terms? Was it race, money, color, sex? In the McCoy family's tearful faces, I recognized the disposition and vernacular of my distant relatives, and even social workers who were nice to me. Some foster people who were as well. Nice or not, they gave me a simplified profile, passed college applications right on by me, and limited my story. Same thing they were doing to the new tragic African-American hashtag. Even in death, it was a glass ceiling on the narrative for girls like us. I was still here, free to tell the whole truth of myself. I was changing names, of course, not that anyone was innocent or deserved protecting. I wasn't just Tragedy Powell. Every time I encountered Raven in the form she made me think of her in, I felt my old name calling me back. So,
Thank you so much. Again, we just want to send you so much love, Kalisha, one, for participating in this event, but also, you've contributed to the Black narrative in ways that, people really have to be kind of dedicated to reading your work, and fully participating in your work. So we appreciate that. And we equally appreciate, you taking a chance, with AALBC.com. There are no guarantees in life. But for you to say to yourself after this is your 5th or 6th book, I'm going to do something conscious about how I move forward, says a lot about who you are, but also, the opportunities. Like, I know it's 8 o'clock now, we're supposed to be wrapping soon, but like, I even wanted to talk to you about mentorship and how Sapphire was your mentor and maybe you are mentoring others. But I just wanted to bring Troy back into the conversation. One, thank you so much for this excellent book, but also, again, thank Troy Johnson for, taking a chance. These endeavors aren't easy or simple. So I don't know if Troy, if you have any words you want to say at the, to help wrap things up.
Yeah, I appreciate all of you who showed up on the call. It did really remind me of a Black Party for a hot minute. But what you said, Ron, I'll just echo what you said about the importance of what Kalisha did. And, she could have published with a major publisher or a larger independent, but, she recognized that, she recognized the importance of working within the community and seeing what we can do. And the book is going to be treated differently than the book that's published by a mainstream publisher. It's not going to, there's going to be ongoing marketing and promotion of this book. That's why all formats came out at the same time. So it will be handled differently. I think it was Donna or someone in the chat who said it's really a family. I mean, I don't exist without you. I don't exist without Kalisha and many of the other people, too numerous to name, who are on the call now, who are supportive of what I'm trying to do. And really what I'm trying to do is just, provide agency for our voices. I mean, we can't be beholden to some major corporation in order to get things done. And I think, steps like this, are important. And, again, Kalisha could have published with a bigger house, but she was intentional in this decision. And it's not like it wasn't without benefits. So there are some actual benefits of what we're doing. So it's not a major trade-off. And
yeah, absolutely. I look at it. I mean, I honestly look at it like making history. Because I back in college was wanting to be on the ALBC side. If you were a writer, you wanted to be on the site, right? Because it had all the Black writers on that site. And so you had to, buy your page and all that, but I didn't have anything to, what was I going to put up there? I wasn't published or anything like that. So yeah, no, I think definitely, Ron and Troy and Dr. Green, and forgive me if I'm missing anybody else, the center, and couple other institutions that we have, Quayle, and we have many institutions that are legendary and historical, and places that I looked up to or imagined or thought about or discovered, even Mosaic. And so yeah, I just honestly saw it as really historical, like wow, this entity that we looked up to and had when there was nothing else could actually publish my work. So yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So once again, I just want to thank Kalisha Buckhanon, Troy Johnson. There's so many people just on this call that I could thank, because they've all sort of touched my life or Troy's and Kalisha's in some way. But I'm not going to keep y'all here until 9 o'clock this evening, just giving a roll call of all the beautiful people on in this event. I don't know if there are additional events planned, but I'm going to, if you registered for this event, we'll share that information with Kalisha and Troy so that they can sort of keep you in the loop as far as future events and things like that. So again, I just want to thank everybody for coming out this evening and in sharing with this celebration of Kalisha's new book, Running to Fall. I don't know, is there anything else any other business we gotta do?
Oh, no, we'll skip that last bit.
Okay,
That last idea.
There was
But,
supposed to be a book giveaway, y'all, but I done went and talked so long. But anyway, thank you all so much for coming, and get home safe. Take care. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Kalisha.
you so much, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Troy.
Bye.
all right, thanks.